Hey everyone, welcome to Mindful Adventures. We've all heard the saying, don't be deceived by appearances. And the nature of all appearances, experiences, and perceptions is that they have a beginning and an end. So whatever it is that arises and shines within one's awareness can be perceived, and then it returns back to its source. But the most deceptive appearance that's out there is that of the mind, and that the mind will cling to our experiences. It'll try and take anything that's perceived through the senses, including the emotions, the energy that's on the move within one's being, and it'll create stories, interpretations, an entire narrative around that experience, and the being can feel limited to a certain range of possibilities depending on the story that's being told through the mind. And this is why we hear of, being asleep versus being woke, and not physically awake. I mean, having one's eyes open, but not in a state of dream, meaning one is awakened to the truth of the being, which is whole, complete, present, here now. Returning to the senses, not only to the senses, returning to the space from which all senses manifest and return to, from which all perceptions emanate and return to. And so I think that it's helpful sometimes to take a look at the spiritual paths that are out there. I truly believe that every path that is available to us, every religion or spiritual practice, contains these hidden gems of legends and stories and metaphors that, if contemplated upon, one can return or really reflect back on oneself and get a glimpse in pure awareness of the truth of one's being. And so let's take the story of the Garden of Eden, for example. Excuse me. So not to go into too much detail, because I'm sure most, if not everyone, is familiar with the story of the Garden of Eden, but you have the tree of life and then the tree of knowledge. Now, Adam and Eve were told to do not consume of this tree. You can look, you can touch, but don't consume too much, right? And so, as the story goes, they ate, and their eyes were open, and they realized their nakedness. They became cognizant of the fact that that there was no hiding, that they were absolutely naked, really fully vulnerable, And the question that I just want to put out there for you to contemplate on is, what would have happened if Adam and Eve, instead of eating, if they just would have sat and watched? What would have happened if they just sat and, instead of grasping a hold of the tree, instead of trying to perceive the knowledge between good and evil, to really know the difference between good and evil, to become judges, what if they would have sat, watched, and waited? Now, if we think, just looking at the simple nature of things, when you see the fruit growing on a tree, one of the signs of ripeness is that the fruit will start to change colors, and then it falls from the tree, right? So I think anybody who's in plant growth or agriculture, or anyone who's worked on a farm, really anybody who knows science, has seen this and can agree that these are the signs of ripeness. And when the fruit falls from the tree, if it's not touched, eventually, if it's not eaten by, the animals that are around, or by the ants, the insects, that eventually the fruit will rot. It'll start to decompose. So, to not be deceived by appearances, if they would have just sat, sitting silently, doing nothing, witnessing the beauty of this tree without beholding necessarily, just waiting, then eventually the fruit would have fell. And in witnessing it fall and witnessing more fruit grow, and then watching that fruit fall, decompose, and rot, returning back to the soil, and then once again watching new fruit arise and then fall, so on and so forth, then would they have fallen for self-deception? When the beholder is beheld by the object of perception, as the story has shown, suffering ensues. And so when it comes to our awareness, going deep in awareness, whatever arises within one's awareness, it arises, it shines. It's helpful to be, to interpret. There's a place for that. There's utility in that. It can be used effectively for communication, for transaction in this world. But beyond that, it doesn't really have much of a use for anything else than to be witnessed, perceived, and to be released. To witness, not be a beholder. The beholder is the beheld. I think J. Krishnamurti said it best, the observer is the observed. Consciousness is witnessing itself, and in this witnessing, in this observation, it is very clear that that which is born and dies is perceived by something, not even something or someone, but is just perceived from a place that is beyond birth and death, that is beyond time and the timeless, that is beyond the form and the formless. It's total and complete. And so as you're moving in meditation and you're witnessing your energies, whether it's anger that arises, I think sometimes when anger comes up, then of course the mind kicks in, the ego kicks in and says, okay, this is the cause of the anger and that is the cause of the anger and it's this. This needs to change in order to make it go away. Or it could be jealousy. It could be sadness. Any emotion. You can take this, what I'm sharing with you, this applies to anything and everything that is perceived, which is everything that's in our phenomenal world and our existence. And if one is able to wait patiently, you will see that that which is an appearance disappears. I mean, and it sounds so simple. It sounds obvious. I realize that. But yet, with the hypnosis of beholding, with the hypnosis of the illusory mind, one takes that to be the reality, eyes wide open, but not perceiving that that which appears disappears. Who is the one that is there first, before the appearance arises? Who is the one that is witnessing both the appearance and the disappearance? This is the self, the true self. And so this food, this fruit that they were consuming, what is the nature of this fruit? There was something in it that seemed to cause a little bit of a corruption. It seemed to obstruct the radiance of the intelligence, the light that is emanating from their eyes. It seemed to obstruct that and take something that was an absolute zero, making it a one, and then a multiplicity of duality, an entire play of existence. So what is this fruit? And I like to call this fruit food for thought. Information. Right? I think we've all experienced this craving for a knowledge in food for thought. It's like, oh, this is good food for thought. Let me marinate on this a little bit, right? Well, this is the thing about food for thought, is that all information is not knowledge. Information is information. But who is this information coming to inform? Is it informing the heart? Is it informing one's intuition? Is it informing the being? Or is it informing the mind, the ego, which is an illusion in and of itself? And so how to move in intuition, in awareness, to see if the food for thought that you have been digesting leads to satisfaction. How can it be done? Mindfulness helps. Meditation for sure helps. I like inquiry. That also helps. But with self-inquiry, if you could ask yourself, what information have I been digesting that has yet to lead to satisfaction? What I mean by satisfaction, being satiated by the food, being satiated by this fruit of knowledge, is if it brings silence in you, stillness, then intuitively, okay, silence, peace, restfulness, this is good. If the food for thought that you are consuming, the information, is informing the body-mind identification, the ego identification more, meaning more chatter, more division, more internal conflict, more duality, then that is a sure sign that the fruit that you have been consuming is not that of truth. It is false, in my opinion. So again, information, this is why we have to be very, very alert and careful about the information that we're taking in. As we've seen nowadays more than ever, the misinformation that's out there, I would say that all information is misinformation unless it goes through this test. Not the test necessarily of somebody else saying, hey, this is true and this is false, or according to somebody else's judgment or opinion. I've said before, even what I'm saying, the words that I'm speaking is not absolute truth. I'm just pointing. That's it. I'm just pointing. I'm not saying the thing that is, because it really cannot be said. But again, it's about returning to a state of silence, one's being. And in this awareness, in the right attentiveness, one's intuition is able to discern, not judge, but discern, does this fruit, does this information give birth to more silence and more bliss? Or does this fruit produce more division and chaos and illusion in me? And this type of inquiry is direct, and one has to face themselves. So I say this, I feel like I say this each and every time. To face oneself sincerely is to go into self-inquiry with these types of questions. And then clarity. So may all beings tap into the true intuition to discern for oneself between good and evil. And in this discernment, and in right attentiveness, one comes to see that both good and evil, life and death, blessing and curse, emanate from the same source. And in this realization, abide in peace. Namaste.